Imperialism is one of the great theoretical contributions by Vladimir Lenin. He called it the highest stage of capitalism, meaning the point at which capitalism had developed to the point where the contradictions of the system would lead to its downfall. I tend to disagree with him. As we can see, no such thing happened. In my opinion, this globalization of the economy that we see with the International Monetary Fund and BRICS as they carve up the world is an even higher stage of capitalism. As Lenin said, if it were necessary to give the briefest possible definition of imperialism, we should have to say that imperialism is the monopoly stage of capitalism. Such a definition would include what is important. For on the one hand, finance capital is the bank capital of a few very big monopolist banks, merged with the capital of the monopolist associations of industrialists. And on the other hand, the division of the world is the transition from a colonial policy which has extended without hindrance to territories unseized by any capitalist power to a colonial policy of monopolist possession of the territory of the world, which has been completely divided up. Nonetheless, imperialism was still predicted to be the final stage according to Lenin. The primary feature of this stage was monopoly, when the concentration of capital was so great that it created few firms that dominated the entire market and wielded near absolute power as they merged with the political power of the state. Capitalism transformed into imperialism as the contradictions of it began to take a shape of a kind of new order. The transformation of free competition into monopoly, its opposite. Monopoly is a transition from capitalism to a higher system. Monopolies were shown to have been created in two ways. In England, they came about as a product of the free market system, the natural result of the market itself. In Germany, the monopolies were given birth by protectionism. Monopolies did not just dominate the industrial sector, they formed the banking sector as well. These banking monopolies allowed banks to grow beyond their principal function of serving as middlemen in making payments. They began to control the capital and means of production along with raw materials. They maintained this control by regulating the issuing of credit. Lenin pointed out that the 20th century marked the transition to the dominance of finance capital. Interestingly, this came to be the opposite of what Marx predicted would happen. He said that finance capital would become wholly subservient to industrial capital. Even bourgeois economists acknowledge the problems of monopolies and create policies and plans to deal with such outcomes. Unfortunately, there are still some that are naive enough to deny that monopolies can even happen. Milton Friedman himself declared that free trade would actually prevent monopolies from forming, and that this was more effective at fighting them than limiting the size of businesses, which must less restrictions in human freedom. Lenin saw imperialism as a new stage of capitalism. The old stage was dominated by free competition and the export of goods. The new capitalism was monopolies that exported capital. Profits could be increased by exporting that capital to the more backward countries. Why? Backward countries, profits were high because capital is scarce. The price of land relatively low, and wages were low. Raw materials are cheap. Here we run into an interesting problem of Marx. The exporting of capital to a country accelerates its development into capitalism, which is why Marx supported the U.S. invasion of Mexico. He thought the process was inevitable and would eventually bring all countries up to the same economic level. Then, once the whole world was relatively at the same level of proletarianization, it was only a matter of uniting all workers across all borders, hence the term workers of all countries unite. Imperialism led to conquest. Capital exporting countries had divided the world in a figurative sense. Finance capital had led to the actual division of the world. Domestic monopolies enter the world market and create cartels among themselves, spheres of influence. Late-stage capitalism shows us that the relations between capitalist associations grow up based on the economic division of the world in alliance with political powers and the struggle for spheres of influence. This struggle for the spheres of influence would lead to conflicts for territory. In other words, repartition was still possible and will happen. In fact, this monopoly stage of capitalism led to colonial conquests. In the monopoly stage of capitalism post-1870s, there was still a boom in colonial conquest. Finance capital intensified in the partitioning of the world. As much as capitalists like to deny the existence of imperialism, many capitalists acknowledge it as a real force. Even some openly advocated it. In 1895, Cecil Rhodes, the man who started the Anglo-Boer War, not only approved of imperialism, but saw it as the only way to save Britain. He said, "I was in East London, a working-class quarter, yesterday and attended the meeting of the unemployed. I listened to the wild speeches which were just a cry for bread, bread. And on my way home, I pondered over the scene, and I became more convinced that the importance of imperialism, my cherished idea, is a solution for the social problem, i.e., in order to save the 40 million inhabitants of the United Kingdom from a bloody civil war, we colonial statesmen must acquire new lands and settle the surplus population to provide new markets for the goods produced in factories and mines. The empire, as I have always said, is a bread and butter question. If you want to avoid civil war, you must become imperialists. Thank you for watching. If you like this program, then please head over to my Patreon page and set up a monthly donation. It's your donations that keep this program running. Also, if you would like, please rate, comment, subscribe, and share in various social media.